The question is, what is the most difficult? Uh, what is most difficult when finding talent? And right now, as you can see, about 75% of the votes put it under a few qualified candidates. And I would say that's pretty accurate with what I am hearing from my clients and what we're working through. It's taking a lot longer to find staff and find the good people. And then, of course, you always have the challenge of keeping them. So as you look at that poll, I am going to get the PowerPoint started here. Give me a second to set up the screen share. And we will... So why am I not sharing here? Hang on just a second. More technical difficulties. We'll get started. All right, air meet is still a lot of fun trying to figure out what's going on here. Apparently, I had to take the poll down before I could start sharing my screen. So now we can get things rolling. All right, so I'm pulling up the PowerPoint here. Just quick in chat, can everyone see the screen right now? It should be a nice ocean view at the moment. If somebody could just text me quick in chat just to confirm it's there. Okay, I've seen the thumbs up. We are golden. And let's play. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks again. And this is going to be a discussion of why employees aren't beating down your door and what you can do about it. So we're going to cover a lot of information today. As you can imagine, you're not the only ones facing this difficulty. Pretty much every client I'm talking to right now is going through the issue of finding and keeping good employees. So what we're going to cover today is the realities of hiring. I'll go over that quick. It's probably none of it's going to be a surprise to you, but definitely did do a little research on it. Found some interesting stuff that I think is worth sharing. Another thing we're going to cover is common failures that most businesses do when they try to hire. The primary change you need to focus on when hiring, and I'm sure, again, this is probably not going to be a big secret to anybody, but often when I talk to companies and they're having difficulty hiring, they are not covering some of the basic steps, and it's all about doing the basics. The importance of ABL, and you're probably asking, well, what is ABL? I'll cover that a little bit later as well. Tactics for filling frontline positions, also tactics for filling professional positions. And another one that's really more impactful where I'm here at in the Midwest is trying to fill those positions that aren't in large cities. As you can imagine, when you're getting into a rural or a country situation, it can sometimes be hard to pull talent, especially if that talent is coming from a larger community. We'll then recap everything. I'll leave some time for Q&A, and feel free to, again, share in the Q&A section, and I'll get back to you after the end of the presentation. So what are the challenges we're facing? Well, there's a number of them. First of all, probably one of the biggest one that goes unnoticed is a lot of talent retired in the last couple of years. So when the pandemic hit, of course, we had the Great Shutdown. The Great Shutdown led to a lot of people leaving their positions or getting let go. A number of those people were near retirement age. And what we saw is instead of people re-entering the workforce, they just decided that they had had enough. One of the main issues that I think is different now versus, say, in 2007, 2008, when there were a number of people ready to retire, is the stock market didn't take a huge hit. So a lot of people still had their retirement nest egg, and that was still in very good condition. And at that point, they said, what the heck? I don't need to go back to work at this point. I'm just going to take it as a retirement. I looked up the stats on that, and it was about 3 million people that retired during the pandemic compared to, on average, about 1 million people that were retiring before that. So that tells us there's quite a few people that have just opted not to get back in the workforce, which is making a huge difference in who we're hiring. And especially, and this is another common concern that I have, is the people just don't have the experience. So while we are seeing a lot of younger people in the workforce, they don't have the same level of tenure or experience that a lot of these people that have left the workforce. So we're also seeing this huge knowledge gap combined with with the talent gap as well. Employee satisfaction and engagement remains relatively the same. So if you look at what was going on all the way back to the last recession and then through the pandemic, um, really about 80% of the people uh, who are rated on their job satisfaction or job engagement typically are listed as unsatisfied or disengaged, and there's a fairly high percentage of those who are actively disengaged. And by active disengagement means that they're actively looking for their next opportunity. And what's interesting is this really hasn't changed, and companies have spent a great deal of money trying to get employees to be more engaged, more connected to their jobs, and obviously extend the life of the employment, if you will. And what we're finding is that really hasn't done much of anything. So we've invested all this money to get employees more connected to their jobs or more valued in their positions, and we really haven't done a good job with that, or we aren't answering the right needs of the employees. And again, there's fewer workers to fill those open slots. So we have two situations where we have more jobs than we have people available for those jobs. Some of those, as I mentioned earlier, are retiring, but we also have, as other generations are coming up in the ranks, we have fewer people that are even available to fill those positions. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here that we're facing, and that's causing a lot of the challenges that you are getting with hiring. Basically, it's come down to, if you want good employees, you're going to have to find them already working, so you're going to have to go steal them from somebody else. And I know that's often something that we don't want to do. We don't want to create bad feelings with other employers, but it's also reached the point where, again, there's just too few people and too many positions open. And we'll see what happens here over the next year with everything that's going on, if that maintains his path. A number of people just they've made personal choices. They're not here. In the last recession, for example, a lot of people were concerned about losing their jobs, so they would stick with the company no matter really what happened to them. They wanted to keep that job. Obviously, there were some changes that happened this go around with the pandemic. There was a lot more stimulus money that was pumped into the system, which helped keep people afloat. Obviously, there's a lot of different pieces to that. Some people it helped out greatly, other people it didn't help out at all, and there were a number of people who probably didn't need it in the first place. But what it did was it did give people a lot of choices as far as what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. You also had a lot of people that were now working remotely versus working in the office. They didn't have to go back to the office anymore. They could do their job from their kitchen table, from their office desk, wherever it might be at their home. And let's face it, that's a huge advantage. If you are, somebody who maybe had to commute hour to work every day, that really gets old after a while. And now when you can do pretty much the exact same job and do it in your house and eliminate 2 hours of travel time, plus you're spending time with family and with your kids. And there were a lot of people that really took a gut check and decided that they did not want to go back to the standard of living that they were at before. And what was interesting is, after the stimulus went away, we didn't see this huge uptick in people returning to work. And that's something that a lot of politicians and a lot of news media expected, was once you cut back on those checks, that people want to go back. Well, what it turned out is people changed their lifestyles. So we saw some people that, again, they could live off of less money and they didn't have to go back. And they also had other choices because, again, there are a lot of jobs available out there. So they're finding where those opportunities are at. We also saw a number of people that made the choice to just leave the workforce, or to start their own business, which we'll talk more about later. Also, there was too much focus placed on college. And as a college grad myself, and I know a number of people on this call also are college grads, the one thing we did do a disservice to ourselves when we look at the positions that are open, and a number of the positions are in the contractors, trade fields, where they're really experiencing a shortage. So the biggest shortages, that we hear on the news are the frontline workers for restaurants and hospitality. That obviously hasn't bounced back for a number of reasons. But we also see these skilled trade workers where, again, we have more people retiring than are there to fill the positions. And that, to me, comes from about 40 years of saying that every kid needs to go to college. don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value in going to college. I'm not here to diss on that at all. In fact, I found a lot of value going to college as well. However, there are people that just aren't cut for college. If we look at dropout rates and things like that, dropout rates are fairly high for a college education. Where in a lot of skilled trades positions, you can go and many companies will teach you those trades, or will run you through classes where you don't have that huge tuition spend that that going to a normal 4-year university will provide you. So it's interesting to see how we fill these gaps in the future. I believe I'll share some long-term examples as we discuss further slides of what I believe we need to do to make that happen. The rise of the contract worker. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that there's more people that made a choice to do their own thing and basically do the same thing that we were doing for a business, but instead doing it for themselves. So these are now 1099 contract workers versus W-2 employees, and that's given them the freedom to do more and travel more, but it doesn't necessarily fill all the opportunities that we have out there. Um, a lot of people that started their own business seem to be doing pretty well with it. What also I found interesting, I did a little more research on this too. That's why I'm looking at my notes here. Is there's a number of people out there that are actually working 2 jobs right now. So they're working full time at home remotely, and they've also picked up a second job, and much of that I believe is also kind of the moonlighting. They're subcontracting out and doing work for other companies, which in some cases might be worrisome to you as a business owner, is that they might be working with your competitor while they're working with you. So there's going to be some different tactics that we can talk about. I'm not going to have a lot of time to spend on them here, but it's definitely a concern and something you need to be worried about, because the other problem is this isn't also just talking about keeping or finding new talent, but how do you retain your talent? And if they're out there and they're doing work on the side and somebody makes them an offer, they've already got a foot in the door. They've already got the relationship. So this is something to be concerned about as well. The last thing that I pointed out here is fundamentally, I don't think a lot of businesses have kept up with the changes. I was talking and harping about this over 10 years ago, actually, at the end of the Great Recession that we had in 2007, 2008. There were a number of companies I saw that just, they were kind of in that old mindset, and they always thought there were going to be enough people, and if this one doesn't work out, there's going to be more that are coming in the door. And what we've seen since really about 2010, 2011 is we've just seen that number step down and the competition ramp up. We've had a pretty long stretch of good economic times, since after the last recession. And the businesses haven't really done much differently in the form of hiring and what they're doing. And some of that is causing them to play catch up right now, which is what I believe is leading to a lot of the issues that we have here. And so where do most businesses fall short? Well, a big part of that really comes from not having a set group of people of talent to draw from. It's pretty much businesses hire on event. And what I mean by that is there comes along a job opening, or through expansion, job openings are created. And that's typically when the hiring's done. You might say, well, Dan, that's kind of how it works. But here's the problem. You don't have a network or a group of people to pull from. So you're doing what everyone else is doing, which is job opening, publish on, pick any site, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, any one of those, and you're just broadcasting out there that there's a need. Well, here's the problem. There's, how many other companies with very similar needs to yours that are also doing the same thing. And that's where, if we had kind of a sales funnel, if you will, of people coming in, that you could avoid some of those issues, because you would have kind of the first group of people to call. And that's where, if there's one thing you take away from this webinar today, is we have to take a lot more from what we do with sales and marketing and apply that to hiring. And that, to me, is the biggest issue or challenge that most businesses haven't spent their time doing. Is they only hire when they need to hire, and then they don't worry about it. Well, you might say right now everyone is hiring pretty much full time because they're all feeling gaps in their positions, and that, to me is where now you're behind the eight ball and you got to do a lot to play catch up. Another thing that I've observed over the past decade or so is employee wages were way too low, way too long. So when we came out of the last recession, there was this kind of recovery phase. The recovery, in my opinion, was fairly long. It was several years, not just several months. And businesses got very comfortable keeping wages down. And there were a number of articles talking about how wages didn't bounce back, and they really haven't bounced back until the past, couple of years or so. And to me, that really impacted, again, the desire of people to look at opportunities elsewhere when they realized that they were probably being underpaid for a number of years. So we always talk about loyalty and we want employees to be loyal to the company. The truth is that loyalty's gone. It's been gone for quite some time. And by keeping those wages low, we've done very little to reinforce it. The other thing that we've done very little of is we've done very little coaching or mentoring or training of people coming into the workforce or growing within their positions. And I'm sure there are businesses on this call or on this webinar that do have a pretty good training program that say that, we invest quite a bit in that. And then good for you. Then you are one of the people that have done it right. I do talk to a lot of companies, though, that look at it that, well, if I hire this person and I know they're not going to be here that long, why do I want to invest in training them for the next opportunity or the next job where potentially they're working for my competitor? Well, that's kind of silly because you need that person to gain experience, gain knowledge, build upon their talent where you're at. And if you're so fearful of not providing that training or any more than the bare minimum to do their job, how can you expect them to be productive? And ultimately, they will still learn something and they will still go somewhere else. So we'll talk about some different ways to address that as well. Sorry, of course, somebody has to call right now. Also, there's no opportunities for advancement. And to me, this is a bigger challenge with smaller businesses or smaller companies is people are looking for opportunities. They want advancement. They don't want to sit in the same job for years or decades on end. Those days have pretty much ended. So the expectation is they will have an opportunity to grow. And for most younger people, they looked at their opportunity to grow into advancing into a different job in a different company. So they'd spend a couple of years here, and then they take the next job at a next higher salary or a next higher position, and that's how things would go. So as businesses, we have to find ways to keep people connected to their jobs. I'm not going to say engaged because I believe engagement is overused at this point, and as I pointed out earlier, it's not something that's really changed. So we have to really kind of change our thought process on what creates engagement for an individual to stick with you for a longer period of time. There's also been limited opportunities for training. So outside the bare minimum for what they're doing in that position, there really hasn't been much more to really help them expand their career or grow. And again, this is a huge disservice that companies have done to themselves outside of concern out of people leaving. Well, guess what? People are leaving anyway. On average, a person will stick around for approximately 2 years at this point, and it's now dipping under the 2-year mark. If we go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was about 3 years. We go back, again, about to 2007, 2008 time, it was about 4 years. And I've seen a number of resumes where there are job positions that this person has taken, and most of them have been 6 to 9 months. I remember a time when I graduated from college where if you had that kind of look on your resume, you probably wouldn't get hired because they would see you as a job hopper. Well, truth is, a lot of people right now are job hoppers, and we got to be aware of that and really, work towards those weaknesses or those challenges to overcome them. One of the big ways that we really need to address that we talk about often, but I truly believe most companies don't do a good enough job with, is really focused on workplace cultures and values. People want something more out of their position. Yes, they want good pay. Yes, they want good benefits. Yes, they want flexibility, but all those things kind of incorporate into the culture of the company and how the company treats their employees. And I've worked with a number of companies, family-run companies that say, well, we treat their employees like family and this, that, the other thing. only to find out that the first sign of a downturn, they're cutting jobs and cutting wages right away. Well, is that living the values that you'd set forth? And that's where you really have to look closely at what values are you creating and do they align with you. We'll talk more about that later. Most companies I know have created values. Most companies I know also couldn't tell you what those values were if you asked them. And if you don't believe me, here's a test that you can do for your own business. Go out and talk to your employees and ask them, what are the values of the company? Better yet, go out and talk to the leaders in that company and ask them what the values are. Give you an example. A couple days ago, I was working with a client or a client I was actually starting up with, and I asked them, you know, you sent me this information, you sent me this list of mission, vision, values. Tell me what your values are. And I got a blank stare. And keep in mind, these are the guys and gals that created a lot of these values through a completely different workshop. So they spent a great deal of time and effort to put this together, but yet they couldn't even explain what their own values were. And if they can't explain it, how do you expect the employees to align to it or to even know? How do they know that the job they're doing is in alignment with what the company's expectations are? And I talk to a lot of employees as well, and many employees will say, well, this is what they say, but this is what they do. So there is a complete disconnect there. And the reason why there is so little on this slide is I believe that most businesses need to spend more time in this area, especially if they're looking to attract or retain help. Because if you aren't spending your time here, the sole thing that differentiates you from every other company that does something similar than you is gone. If you can't show your differences here and you can't align those differences with the people you're looking for, it's going to be very hard to find. It's going to be very hard to retain. Many of those people are going to turn around, walk out the door. So that leads to something that I brought up earlier. And what is ABL? And I mentioned that in the kickoff that ABL is something we all need to be worried about. And to me, ABL is always be looking. I used to say always be hiring, but we aren't always in a hiring situation. Now might be an extreme example where we are. And to be honest, for many companies, it's going to be like this for probably the next decade or better until things level out. But we just don't have enough people to fill the positions that are open. And this is where, again, sales and marketing we need to take the concepts of sales and marketing and apply it to our hiring process. We should have a little black book, if you will, of people that we could reach out to that we feel are qualified, that we would love to have work for us. And ideally, if you find a really good candidate, you make a room for them. You don't wait until you have a need, because you never know when the lesser candidates or the lesser employees are going to take off and leave for a different position. And to me, this is the greatest disservice most companies have done to themselves, is they haven't created a process where they're always looking. And this goes beyond HR. I know there are several HR people that are part of this webinar. Your job is extremely important. What will make your job easier is if you have some of those senior leaders that are also helping you actively look to find people to fill potential future positions or even positions now. We have some great tools out there that allow us to do this, and they aren't ZipRecruiter and they aren't Indeed. And one of them, in fact, is something that should be live broadcasting right now, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. It is a valuable tool from a business side because you can get some background on people. But how many business leaders are active on LinkedIn? I will tell you the number is extremely small. Most people have their profile page set up, and very rarely do they ever look at it. And I will tell you, even from my own personal experience, it can be hard to get into LinkedIn every day. There is far less entertainment value in LinkedIn than there is in Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and all these other places that we are also connected to, that we just don't take the time to spend here, or to spend there, I should say, and really take full advantage of the resources. And LinkedIn, you can do quite a bit for nothing, and just having your profile in there. For having a premium membership, you can do even more. You can do more advanced searches. You can connect to more people that fill the technical aspects of the roles that you're trying to open up. and you're not doing anything to connect with them. Well, if they don't get to know you, they don't get to know your business, they can't learn about you except when you have a job opening. It's going to be very hard to attract them in, because again, it's really about the differences that we create in our company that's going to be what's going to attract that next round of people, that next round of talent into our organization. And if we haven't educated them on our culture, our mission, what really drives us, what really motivates us, and what aligns with their beliefs, it's going to be very hard to keep those people intact. There are a number of people that'll take a job just for a good salary. And if it's very similar to what I talk about with companies that want to constantly lower their prices in order to get more business. Well, it's a race to the bottom then. On the other side, when you're hiring, right now, salaries are a race to the top. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be able to pay more. There's always going to be somebody who can offer more benefits, but that doesn't make them a great place to work, nor does it make it a great culture. And I truly believe that many businesses or many people are looking for businesses that are going to be more in tune to their own personal values and beliefs. And they're going to want to connect there, and they might be willing to sacrifice some of those benefits or some of that salary for something that better aligns to who they are. So hiring is no longer an event. It is really an ongoing, continuous process that should happen no matter what position you have to fill, or if you have any positions at all. This is the key part. You need to always be looking for that next possible candidate and always be open to it anywhere that you are. I've had candidates that have met future employees that were wait staff at a restaurant they were at. In fact, I remember I was out with a client. We were having kind of our dinner meeting, and the person who came up to us, he started a conversation with her and asked her what her background was. She explained what she was doing and that she was going to be graduating from college very soon in this profession. And it turns out that profession was exactly what my client needed. He handed her a card. He said, "We would love to meet with you. Can you stop at our office next week?" Lo and behold, a week later, she was hired for a position that she had when she graduated from college. So this was a huge benefit to her, and it was also a huge benefit to him. But it only happened because he was out there actively looking and had that person pretty much fall in his lap. What we also need to be doing, I put this in this slide, but this is going to kind of filter throughout, is we are waiting until we are finding those experienced people when we really should be starting to groom those people at an earlier age. Middle school and high school especially, it's important to build relationships with the counselors there, with the teachers, with the different programs that are going on, because this is the opportunity to get these kids and help them get educated on what's going to be available when they graduate. Like I said, some kids are going to be destined for college. They're going to go on to highly technical, highly professional positions that require a 4-year degree. There's other kids that might be looking at it, though, going, well, that's not really what I want to do. I want to do something different. And like I said, skilled trades are a tremendous opportunity right now. In fact, you can probably make more doing a skilled trade right now than you can going to college for 4 years and getting a professional degree in some cases. So this is something that we really need to be aware of. And as business leaders, we need to do a better job of stepping into those mentorship roles and connecting with the high schools and really building a partnership to show them opportunities. And here's the reality of it, because I have kids that have graduated from high school and talked with the counselors there. And one of the things I learned is they are motivated, or they are incentivized to get as many kids as possible to get a 4-year degree, to go on to college. And when I asked about tech school, trade schools, things like that, they're like, well, yeah, we talk about it, but we also then lean heavily on going to get a 4-year degree. And to me, that's something you have to be aware of. But unless you're the squeaky wheel, you're not going to get that opportunity. And while those positions are, again, filling less experienced opportunities, at the same point, you need that incubator to start. You need to grow from that farm league, if you will, into the professionals. And if you aren't talking with those kids and aren't showing them the opportunities, then more often than not, they're going to go off in a different direction and you're going to lose out. And that's where we really need to spend more of our time and focus on. We need to participate with other organizations, other youth groups. Throw out a shameless plug here. I've been with Big Brothers Big Sisters for a number of years. I've been on their board. I helped them develop a program that was targeted towards middle school and high school kids to introduce them to careers and get them involved. The best part is you have this group of youth that is being mentored. They're being coached by other professionals, people that have been in the workforce, that are planting these seeds, and you can really build a huge opportunity by working with these organizations, because they are looking for kids, looking to keep them connected to their mentors, but also looking to get them out of their current situation. That's true Boys and Girls Club. If there's various urban leagues around, these are all different places that you can go and you can find the early stages of bringing those people on. Maybe there's potential for internships, and looking at different ways that you can have, bring them in as employees and maybe do some work to get them interested in your business, interested in the company. When they graduate, maybe they make the choice to come work for you. Maybe there's an opportunity to train them there. So we really do need to consider that. Partner with work programs. I also think one of the things that we need to look at are maybe people that are getting out of the prison system. And that might be controversial for some of you, but in some cases, again, these people have served their time. If you don't want them to go back to the previous habits, why not give them a new opportunity here? And there might be some very good qualified candidates that you could bring in that would do wonderfully in your business. Now, that is up to you to decide how to handle that, but I think you really do have to look for where your options are at. And I did find several articles that were talking about consider people coming out of the prison system that have kind of paid their dues, paid their time. See if you can partner with them and create a new lifestyle for them. Is entirely possible. Constantly working with teachers and professors. I can't tell you enough how important it is to connect with your local universities, especially the universities that have degrees in your field or your industry that are going to be jobs that you need to fill. Don't just go to the career fairs. The career fairs are very important. I also want to talk to those professors. I want to meet with the people that are starting to teach these kids, the details of their position, of their job, and really start to pick from them who are the best candidates, who do they like, who have the good work ethic, who are really picking up on the knowledge that they're teaching. And if you ask any professors, they know who those people are. And the best way to get that talent, especially if you need that entry-level talent early on, is to start building those relationships and connections. Hopefully, then you can take those connections, turn them into an internship. From the internship, maybe you can turn them into a summer position or part-time position as they finish out their degree. So there's a lot of opportunities here that we really need to spend more time with. And I'm sure some of this is probably no secret. There's probably many of you that have gone to career fairs, gone to colleges, but it's not just, again, a once or twice a year stopping on campus. I encourage a regular connection, just like you would in sales or marketing. There's got to be that constant feedback. There's got to be that top of mind awareness. If you're just showing up every now and again, the other business that is spending more time building more connection is going to be far more powerful with it than you just showing up on occasion where they don't know anything about you. We had some really good success. So I graduated from UW-Platteville, working with an engineering company. He was having trouble finding good engineers to fill the position. We went to the career fair. We made new connections. He had more than enough opportunities to have people apply, and actually did get a few great candidates out of it, a couple for internships and one that will be starting this May. So it's entirely possible. You got to get out there and make it happen. So tactics for filling frontline positions. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because some of them are pretty standard. Culture, we've talked enough about. Again, review your culture. Look for where there's opportunities. Look for where there's alignment. Look for where there's misalignment. Break down those barriers and figure out how you make sure that the culture you say you are is the culture that you're living in and the culture that's growing in your company, and not a disconnect that way. Flexibility is going to be a big thing from here on out. And I understand for manufacturing positions, even for frontline workers in hospitality and restaurant, sometimes flexibility isn't something that is necessarily something you can provide. Typically in a manufacturing setting, Work is based on shifts. At the same point, we need to be looking for ways to be as flexible as possible and provide as many opportunities for people to live their lives in a more productive way to themselves. And that is going to be a difficult challenge that I think we're all going to have to realize over the course of the next decade is that's going to be very important to a lot of people, and they're going to expect that. Pay right now, and I looked up the numbers, so pay has gone up approximately 4.7%. And these are numbers that were pulled in January of this year. And so as wages have gone up 4.7%, which is a pretty big jump overall, inflation has jumped by 7.5%. So roughly about a 2.4, 2.8% difference in where inflation is at versus where wages is at. And we see a lot of wages going up, but it's not keeping up with inflation. So people are actually, even though they're making more money, taking a pay cut. And of course, the politicians all brag about the number of positions they created and how wages are increasing and how good everyone's doing. The reality is we're paying more for goods right now. And that is going to be going on for the foreseeable future, for at least the next year, I think is safe to say. We need to be doing a better job with wages. And this is something that smaller companies are not going to want to hear about. While I don't think you have to be the highest paid person out there, you better at least be competitive, and better be competitive with inflation, or you're going to be hurting to find people. Again, there's enough positions out there open. I know a number of frontline positions that are offering anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000 in a hiring bonus, $1,000, $500 in referral bonuses if you get your friend to join the team. Again, a lot of these companies can play these games where we really have to be aware of it. Benefits are also something that need to be looked at. How are your healthcare benefits? How is time off benefits? Things like that. And I actually have a suggestion for time off, which I'll talk about pretty soon. But also, what are the opportunities for advancement? If you're looking to plug somebody in a position and expect them to stay there this entire time, it's not going to happen. They're going to look for other places to go to advance their careers. The people that typically want to stick around aren't always your A people, or aren't always the people that you necessarily want to advance. While they might do work, while they might fill those positions, are they being as productive as you need them to be? And this is also something I should add here, is we shouldn't be settling for the people that we're looking for. Back to, if you're always in that hiring mode or always in that looking mode, you can find the right candidates. Because here's the frustrating part for your high performers. They see the lower performers come in, or they see the lower performers there, and they see really no difference in how they're treated compared to how the high performers are treated. In fact, many times the lower performers get far more attention and far more support than the high performers do. Well, that leads to frustration, that leads to anxiety, it leads to lack of trust with the leadership, because they feel less valued. We somehow need to build teams that are high performing people and try to eliminate the lower performers coming in, or get the lower performers to meet the demands that the high performers have. It's very difficult to do. Pareto's law kicks into place, 80-20 rule, 20% of the work, or 20% of the people do about 80% of the work. That seems to be pretty consistent, but we always need to find ways to, again, look for getting our people more productive and less needy of our leadership time. Because there are a lot of good people that need that support and that expect that support. So tasks for filling the professional positions, again, a lot of them are the same. Focus on culture, focus on flexibility. Here's something I threw in that is probably going to ruffle a few feathers, but I'm telling you, eliminate paid time off. And here's why. I did a little research on how much paid time off is used right now. Roughly anywhere between 30 to 45% of people use their maximum paid time off benefit. That means better than half the people out there never use their full paid time off. And I personally think the numbers are skewed a little bit high there, because most of the companies I talk with, everyone from the owner on down, does not spend all their paid time off like they should. And a lot of people, they're conserving it in case their kids get sick, or in case they get really sick. Of course, with the pandemic, that changed a number of things right there. But what I've found is people value time off. They also value higher pay. But for those that value time off, typically they don't abuse it. And I believe there are ways you can structure the position that if they're doing the work and getting the productivity done, does it matter how many hours they're working or how many days they're working? If they are truly producing what you need them to do, that flexibility to take their kids to the doctor, to spend a day with family can be very, very productive, very helpful. So if you look at it just for the words, it can be very concerning, but I ask you to dig into really what's the advantage of making sure that people have all the time off that they need, and how does that lead to greater productivity in business? I believe there are a number of issues related to productivity that have absolutely nothing to do with offering people time off. So I'd love to expand that conversation at some point. We don't have enough time here today to talk about, but it would be happy to talk with some of you and say, what's it like to try and battle against that time off? Because the other thing is, most people, to attract them away from a position, they're not going to want to start at square one when it comes to vacation time, especially if they have 4 to 6 weeks built up. So that's something you do need to consider, which again weighs more to the advantage of eliminating paid time off and saying you have as much time as you need as long as the job gets done. Now, the accountability needs to kick in. Coaching is something that many businesses have not invested in. Leaders manage, they don't lead, they don't invest enough time in their people. And I see this even from clients that I have, that I'll bring up that they're not spending enough time with their staff to get them up to speed or to answer those questions. It's they're too busy in the work to be working on coaching others. And we have now 2 generations of people that are very used to being coached and very used to getting feedback. I know I'm a Gen Xer, so I came from the generation of latchkey kids where we were pretty much left to fend to ourselves in a lot of ways. And we had to figure things out. Well, we've raised a generation or a couple generations of kids now that really expect more of getting that feedback. And I think we as leaders need to do a better job with that. Well, the only way we can do that is we need to coach them on how to do work that we're normally putting on our plate, because we're afraid to give that work up because we're afraid somebody else is going to screw it up. Well, the reason it gets screwed up is because we haven't done a good job of teaching or coaching other people on how to do those jobs. Again, this leads to the next thing, which is advancement. You should be working on training your replacement or coaching somebody into filling your role, which allows you to move on. And there's many leaders that just don't do that. Again, they want to plug a person in a position, they want to leave them there, and they expect them to stay as long as they want. And they also want to, in some cases, protect their own spot. Well, to me, you are far more valuable if you're coaching other people to fill your shoes. So that provides you the opportunity to move on somewhere else as well. Work from home and hybrid work, that is something that, again, is going to be a major force for the foreseeable future. I know there's companies that are fighting against it. There's companies that are fighting for it. Many companies I know are doing some sort of hybrid, so they're allowing more flexibility to work from home, but also expecting some time in the office. And this is something that's going to completely change the structure of work. And you might say, well, Dan, it already has. Yes and no. Yes, I believe people had to adapt very quickly. We all have suffered Zoom fatigue, but there's still a lot of people out there that haven't figured out the right process or how to balance between work from home and work in the office. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of research showing now that people are moonlighting. They're doing second jobs on top of their primary jobs because working from home, there isn't that oversight. Most people aren't going to go into their office, sit at their desk, and work on somebody else's stuff. I say most people, not all though. So this is going to be, again, where people are going to weigh their time and can they get as much out of their current employer, plus can they work for a different company or do their own thing and also expand on their income. And this is probably more true, again, with those middle level, upper level professional positions where people do have the experience, they do have the knowledge, they know there's a shortage out there, and they're able to tap into that open marketplace. The last statement is something I truly believe, which is you should always, when people leave, you should always leave it better than you found them. And by leaving them better than you found them means that you're spending time on coaching, you're investing in training, you're doing everything you need to really allow that employee to make the most of the current position they are in and give them the opportunity to expand further. Now, if they can't stay with you, hopefully what you've also done is you've also built in kind of this coaching culture where they're training their replacement, where they're working and developing systems or improving the systems you have, and then coaching the next person up to fill their position so that they move on. Most companies are a little bit selfish and they want to plug a person in position and then just forget about it. Those days are long over. So if we aren't doing what we can to prepare, it's going to be very hard to do that. I want to take a moment. We're running. We're getting. And we want to finish up here in the next couple of minutes. Leave time for questions. But rural areas. So if you're in New York, you're in Chicago, you're in Minneapolis, you're in some of these larger cities, it's a lot easier because you have a larger population to pull from. Well, what if you're in a town of 3,000, 50 to 100 miles away from any large metropolis? That is something that a lot of these smaller communities are finding challenges because many small communities have smaller, medium-sized manufacturing companies. For example, I live here in Dodgeville. We have Land's End, which is actually a fairly large company, but attracting people out to the boondocks, if you will, can be a little bit more difficult. We do have the advantage where, within a half hour of Madison, so there's a lot of commuters that just go back and forth. They take advantage of all that Madison has to offer, and Madison's a very lucky community in the lifestyle it has, and all the different things that you can do there. Everything from eating to entertainment is quite a bit. But when you get out into rural America, I hope you like my picture of the farmers here, because you can tell these two people have never grown up on a farm, coming from a farm kid here. They're way too clean, way too happy, and the whole situation is just way cleaner than it usually is when you get on a farm. But we really need to change how we're looking at who we're going after. Back to the sales and marketing focus. We need to change from just marketing to the position, to the technical skills, to really to the personality and behaviors and habits that individual would fulfill coming out to the country. Are they outdoors people? Do they like biking? Do they like camping, hunting, fishing? Are there things in your area that would be very attractive to a certain subset of people? It will be a smaller group of people you're reaching out to, but it's going to be a lot more productive because, let's face it, not everyone is going to want to move to a smaller community. Now, maybe that's changing with some of these large communities and what's going on in some of the bigger cities. People might be looking to get away, in which case you can talk about safety. You can talk about, any being in a small community, what's that's like and how that's different from being a large community. Maybe with education, there's better education opportunities. There's a lot of different ways, but you got to look for ways to really spin why people should come to see you when you don't have this other attraction, which is the large city to pull from. So you really do have to focus beyond just talking about the skill sets and the technical abilities that they're supposed to fulfill into what really makes them a good fit to live in that area. This is also another point to be very helpful to draw from the local townships and the schools to find people who are already living in those communities who maybe want to stick around. They want to stay in a smaller town. They don't want to go to a bigger city or bigger university. In fact, that going back to the engineering example, why we were able to pull the engineers we were, because this engineering firm's in a smaller community, was when we were talking with the students who were getting ready to graduate, they all said they want to be in a smaller business. They want to have more opportunities. They want to connect with their peers, and they want to learn more, and they don't want to be in a bigger company where they're just sitting at a desk doing a job. So we played on what they actually wanted, and that's what provided us the opportunity and allowed us to then select who we thought was going to be the best fit instead of taking what we had to take. So you really have to look at what you have versus what you don't and focus on that. I threw in a bonus slide here, so I left this off the intro up front. But other things that you're honestly going to have to look at doing, and one of them is outsourcing. So like I said, there's a lot of people that have kind of started their own gig, and they could be a 1099 contractor versus an employee. I think you need to pull talent from there. You might also find out that some of that talent is your own, so just be aware of that. Automation And it's time. I think a lot of companies, larger companies, have looked at automation. I also think it's time for smaller companies to see where they can automate when it makes sense. That's why I put in parentheses on here where it doesn't affect the value. So many companies will quickly automate their phone system, for example. They'll install auto attendants. Well, while that might be wonderful for you because you free up people from the phone banks and answering questions, it's a nightmare if you're on the other end of it, because in most cases you get in this doom loop of automated attendance, or you have AI. Here's another place where they try to implement AI, and you ask a question, and 99.999% of the time, the question I ask is not what they can answer, which then gets me dumped again in this doom loop where nothing is ever resolved. And I see this more commonly with larger companies. Your internet providers, your cable companies tend to do this a whole lot. Process improvement. No matter how much you've process improved in the past, there's always room to process improve going forward. What I find with most businesses is they tend to hodgepodge different situations or different processes together to fix different gaps in the system. And over time, it's kind of like duct tape and patchwork quilt time. And ultimately, you create redundant steps, you do too many checks and balances, and you lose efficiency that way. So every couple of years, you should definitely go through and see what is it about your process that needs to improve or needs to change. And the last part is maybe you need to take a moment and, instead of doing as much as you do as far as products and services, really focus on what your bread and butter is. What makes you the most money? Again, it's back to kind of that 80-20 rule. Do you strip away things that are less profitable, less volume, and make room for the stuff that really makes the biggest bang for the buck for your business? And that's something you do need to consider. I know there's a lot of companies out there that just don't want to give up that stuff. Maybe it's because they have a unique niche in it, whatever it might be. But maybe it's time to really consider what it is you're delivering as a product or service and adjust for that. So to recap, businesses will continue to face challenges. There's a number of things that are well beyond your control. There are also a number of things that you do have influence over. Companies need to break away from traditional methods. I talked about a number of different situations here where you're going above and beyond what is traditionally performed when it comes to a hiring standpoint or even a retention standpoint. Culture matters. Alignment matters. You really need to live it. You need to pursue it. You really need to do a gut check and make sure that what you say you are is actually what you are. And if you need help with that, you definitely need to look at other resources to help you with that. And I can help you out there. You never stop looking. Never, ever, 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 ever. I don't care how many positions you have. I don't care how good your little black book is. If you have one at all, you definitely need to keep looking and keep filling that pipeline, just like you would with sales, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Take non-traditional steps to find talent. I mentioned several things that you can do, from a involvement in the community to looking for other opportunities through different organizations and whatnot that maybe you don't spend a lot of time with. And if you are members of not-for-profit boards, this again is an example of maybe where you can, through those not-for-profits, build networks, build connections that open doors for other people. We need to market employees like we market to customers. We should have a demographic profile for an employee, much like we would for a new customer, a new prospect coming in. And at this point, nothing is off the table. So that said, I am going to open it up for questions. We have about 8 minutes left, and I'm very big on start on time, end on time. You have my contact information. If you are on this call and have not connected with me yet, I encourage you to do so through LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk with you at any point. I also do share quite a bit of information on LinkedIn. I do use it quite regularly, so I'm happy to constantly post anything out there. And if there's anything that you would like me to talk about, that's a great format to do. And I'm going to be doing more of these webinars as well. So I'm going to end the show there. I am then going to go back to the air meet here and open this up. And I'm going to quit sharing the screen first. There we go. All right. Welcome back, everybody. So questions. Any questions here? Any questions? There's nothing in the Q&A spot. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? We've got about 7 minutes left. Any guidance on how businesses should spend on these various recommendations? Makes sense at face value, but wise investments are hard to determine. Agreed. I think with all people and all businesses, it tends to be a little bit of trial and error to figure it out, to be honest with you. For example, when I signed up with Big Brothers Big Sisters, there was very strong alignment in who I was as an individual. I'm also, again, I work a lot with coaching and training. By nature, the organization had a lot of aspects that it dealt with that I thought was important to me. So that was a good alignment for me. And I guess here's the most important thing. If you are the business owner, you are the president, how active can you get your team in participating in this? So maybe it's not just you doing it. As I mentioned, it should be more members of the team are better than less. If you just have your HR doing it, well, what happens if your HR director leaves? Well, all the connections go with them. If you're the CEO and you're the only one doing it, what are the connections within the organization that are help building those relationships? So that's really where I would encourage you to step up and say, talk to your team, talk about different opportunities, but it's more about that constant experience and getting out there and really actively pursuing those connections. And yes, it's going to take time. It is going to take time. But if you're not investing the time now, it's going to cost you a lot more time in the future. That's pretty much what I got to say to that. Again, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer that in the future. Any other questions beyond that? How do you properly handle vet contractors and candidates? I'm assuming vet, you mean veterans, people coming out of the military. There are several military organizations. I apologize. I can look them up. I can definitely post them to my LinkedIn feed. Building relationships with those. VA is a good place to start, Veterans Affairs, and really trying to work with those candidates, because many of those candidates they come from a very excellent background in the military, but we haven't done enough to really integrate them back into society. And if you read about, suicides, people coming out of the military, those problems, a lot of them are having difficulties readjusting and getting involved in those organizations, and kind of helping with that transition from military back to civilian life can be quite helpful. So I would encourage you, again, maybe start with the VA, but look at other organizations that are out there that are helping place veterans in position. Thank you for bringing it up. That's another huge opportunity. I would say also another opportunity, which I made notes on but didn't mention here, is look for some of these other service organizations that maybe are working with not only disadvantaged youth, but maybe people with either disabilities or people that are on the spectrum. Patrick Bardsley, I don't think he's on this webinar, but he's somebody I've talked with in the past. I've connected with him. He's got an organization out in New York where they work specifically with, I would say, high school to adults, people that fall somewhere on the autism spectrum, and they're all at different stages, but they've developed a couple different businesses where they're hiring these folks in to do different jobs. And again, there's a lot of them that are high functioning from the autism spectrum. There's some that aren't as high functioning, and they just have them do different roles and different tasks, which gives them a lot of value. So kudos to Patrick for doing that. But I think there are always opportunities in the companies that you have that you can possibly fill those positions as well. Any other questions? If not, we are at just before 11 o'clock my time. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you joining us. If there's anything else, feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn. This, again, posted live on LinkedIn. This will be recorded. I am sending the link to the recording to everyone once it is up and running, so you'll have a chance to review this or share this with other people. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time. Have a great Tuesday. Stay warm and dry and safe for those of you here in the Midwest that are getting hit with snow and ice. But thanks again. And I'm going to end the session. And hang on, I got one question here. Oh, I guess I answered that one. So thank you all and have a great day. Take care.